We move on to the next module right now, which is about marketing. So you have an idea and you have a team, but we need to figure out and do some research and figure out whether or not there is an opportunity here. Who are my customers? And so today we'll learn about the different personas of customers. What's my market? What do you target? And how do you find answers about it? How do you do research? Once again, the gates. And one thing about the gates is they want to know about competition. They want to know about market size. And what does your product do? What you're trying to do is assess the situation, find vulnerabilities or strongholds or opportunities, and formulate the strategy where you can pull this off. And how to exit, that is the second step in the process. When you come up with your strategy, it follows after you've done some research. Feasibility we've talked about. What's unknown about your idea? And you have to do it for marketing too. So an example of a product is like the use of graphene to charge EV batteries, a market using drones for ads, and a strategy is raising $1 million to support an app product. Now, when you look at these three pillars, the lean approach says you focus on marketing, then you work on product development, then you work on fundraising. On a physical product, that's not necessarily the order you should be working on. That in terms of feasibility, it's about discovering your market, who are going to be your lead testers, your beta, and who are going to be your first 5 customers. And that's actually in your textbook. Or in terms of product development, it's about your feasibility, your alpha, and so on. And fundraising, it's how do you raise money. And what it comes down to is, depending on what's your biggest challenge, you should be working on that first. A product development example is the cooling suit. Now, one thing about mankind is that we can live in a bunch of different environments. And when things are cold, what do? We put a winter coat on. And so if we can make a winter coat for cold weather, why can't we make a cooling coat for hot weather? And so the idea is making a neoprene suit. What we can do is we have these evaporator controllers, which basically are mini air conditioners. And then using heat sink sources, we pull all the heat off of your body that's being produced and then demonstrate how this works. So in terms of feasibility, I just need to show that the cooler works and a piece of fabric. Then I can show how a garment's made. Maybe it's bulky and heavy, but how we're going to make it thinner. And then finally, an entire suit. And that's my beta. When we look at the pillars, marketing is about the magnitude, the entry, and once I have my entry, how do I diffuse? Most people, when they pick a product, try to pick easy tech. But also, nobody talks about picking easy markets. All three have to play together. And so if 2 of these are very difficult, you're probably not going to make it. So the challenge is, who's my customer? Can I make money based on this customer set? What's the target market? Even if I have a big market, like the Better Butter dish was an idea of one group, and they wanted to make a dish that will thermally control the temperature of butter. Well, the problem is how big a market do you really have for that? And they said, the restaurant market is a $1 trillion business. Well, yeah, it's a humongous market, but how much of that has to actually do about butter? Now, in terms of who your customer is, a lot depends is, are you selling to a structure like a company, or are you selling to an individual? And if you're talking about selling to a business, then you need to know, how do they make decisions? What's their structure? If it's an individual, then you need to know how they think. And influencers and deal makers are something in the middle. Your customers have a hierarchy, and this is it. The archetype is who you think your customer is. When you think about the buyer for your product, who do you envision? And it could be more than one type of person. What kind of groupings are there? What is the market segment? How responsive is it going to be to you? and that's that you need lead testers. And finally, when I really understand my market, then I can start modeling it. And that's the best situation of all. I know if I can spend money, then I'm going to make money. So in terms of the archetype, it's persona. Who do you see and why? And so the challenge is figuring out who it is. And one way of doing it is actually doing analogy. For example, what's the difference between people who buy Toyotas and Land Rovers? How do I target my audience in a sea of customers and reduce all that noise? And so in terms of persona, I'm looking at these kind of variables to understand who my end user is. And this is referred to as the end user profile. In terms of customer variables, I have descriptors, bases, and behaviors. Who are my customers? Why are they using my product? And what are they using it for? That's what I need to understand. And your book gives you examples of what personas are. In terms of selling business to business, now it's about decision-making units. How many stakeholders do I need to make a decision? What's the timing? Like, do they only buy things in December, or is it throughout the year? What do I have to guarantee, and what are my warranties? How are they going to qualify my product, and how big a purchase size will they make? The types of people in a decision-making unit is you have the decision makers like management. You have economic buyers who can actually sign off on it. You have recommenders, people who can tell you whether or not this is a good idea. You have influencers, and the end users are people who touch the product. But the end users may not be the people who make the decisions on the purchase. An example of that is nurses in hospitals. Nurses can't sign off on buying materials. That's the materials manager. But they can have some input of whether or not you want to get it. You might imagine multiple people who buy your product. Persona is so important because we need to understand who the customer is. And most of all, how do we connect with them? And so we look at what variables actually drive this. An example is GoPro. And the thing is, the average person or athlete won't get our product. And so you need an extreme sports star who'll go ahead and understand it. And so what they did is they used technology, social media. They went after younger people. Each extreme sport is different. They had to be authentic in their message. And that's that people like this, they want you to be real, not somebody who's just trying to sell me something. And not only that, they need to have money. And a lot of them did have money for the simple reason some of these sports are kind of expensive to play. And so if we map it out, what you do is pick two variables and then see where do you land. And this is called a virtual map. Now, what is a market? A market is a collection of individuals who share common values and use your product or service in the same manner. Not only that, but they have to communicate with each other. Marketing works because when you sell something to someone, they talk to somebody else. If you had to market to everyone individually, it would take forever for you to get to 1 million customers. The basics of marketing is a set of activities that you do to influence other people. Does it actually work? Yeah, it does. And so we look at what markets are hot, what's the size of the market, how much of it can I get, what's my profit potential, how am I going to defend it, and what strategies that I implement. What moves can I do that are unique? Attributes are what variables can I attribute to the market, meaning what are their needs, what product. What it comes down to is how much are they willing to pay for things, is there context driving, and what actions can I take where people will act and respond to what I do. And so the marketing recipe is referred to as the 4 Ps. And the first one is you have to assess. You have to get background information. And those are called the 5 Cs, which are defined by this. Once I have my 5 Cs and I understand the background, then I come up with a strategy. I take this mass and then I have to break it up into segments. What are clumps of people? Because if you have clumps of people, that means they have something in common. So they'll talk to each other. Which ones do I want to target? And how do I position myself in such a way that I'm in their mind and they'll think about me? The 4 Ps are distribution. How do I touch the customer? What do I price it? What product features will they pay for? Remember, they want everything and they don't want to have to pay for it. And what messaging do I want to use to connect my product with what they're interested in? And there's also a digital way to do this. But I enjoy marketing a lot because it's strategic in nature. Assess a situation, formulate a response, and execute. Are you market-driven, customer-driven, or technology-driven? Remember, you have to be the best at something. Market-driven, Southwest. Customer-driven, customer intimacy, Facebook. And technology-driven is product leadership like Google or Samsung. The remaining C's, collaborators, competition, context, what's going on in the world, and customer need. And so we start talking about how we segment customers. In terms of markets, we've talked about this before, gap, niches, pain, and differentiation or new products, things that people have never seen before. Now, in terms of gaps, how do we find gaps in markets? There's a rule change. Maybe the industry is slow moving. For example, machine shops. I was paying for something and they pulled out that piece of paper and swiped it. That's how slow moving they are. Or maybe there's a context in the world that's going on. Like right now, there's a lot of violence in the world that we're concerned about. In terms of niches, the car market. First, it was about Olds and Jeffrey. They were the only ones who made cars. And then Ford comes along. But then GM comes along, and what do? They break the market up into price classes and color. And today, as you can see, we have lots of different niches within the car market, whether it's hybrids, mid-sized cars, sporty cars, whatever. So within large markets, new markets are uncovered. An example of niches is sneakers. And within that sneaker market were athletes. So someone came along called Nike and made sports shoes. And so what ends up happening is the athletes move away from the sneaker market because they like the specialty sports shoes. Other people also get interested in it. And then what ends up happening is the sports shoe market grows and the sneaker market gets smaller. But your customers have shifted. Now the nightmare about being the first mover is you made the market. You show people will buy this. You rule. But then what happens is the niche eaters come out. That people find specialty parts in your market and they start eating it away from you. And sometimes the market moves away from you because the new people understand the customers better than you do because they've learned from you. And so you hang on. You have your niche. However, the fast follower is the one who controls the market. And this is what typically happens. It's not the first to market. It's the people who follow who typically dominate. Now, offerings become more customized. And so when you look at pieces of the market, what do you go after? Do you go after the biggest piece, the new pieces? Control many pieces. That's what Toyota does, meaning they do parts and cars and everything else. Or if your market is growing, why do you have to do anything? Just entrench yourself, make sure you own that market, and just grow as the market grows. And PWM is actually a European company that just makes signs for gas stations. And that's how they've grown. In terms of niches, they're considered to be less risky. They tend to have less competition because the market isn't large enough to carry a lot of competitors. And the issues are market size, how are you going to defend it, and how stable is it? Pain or undress needs. And so here are some pain products. For example, the waffle iron. Most homes in America have it. The steering wheel cover, the windshield wiper. All these things seem pretty simple, but there's a need for it. So you have to think about what's the magnitude of the pain and what the market size is. In terms of new markets, those are most conducive to startups. The hardest thing you're fighting isn't other competitors, it's status quo. If you're brand new, the easiest thing for people to do is just sit it out. It's so first mover means it implies that you're the first one into the market. Fast followers are later entrants. Then you have product pioneers, market pioneers, and the innovator. And so, right to left, you're more likely to be successful. First movers, how do you lock people out? How are you going to contend with your fast followers? Do you just give up because you're a first mover? No, but you need a plan, and that's what first movers don't do well. You don't have to be the loser in the long term, but you have to pay for it. Your first mover strategy is, how do you know your market's going to change? The target's moving. If you're too early and can't make a profit, find a bunker. And first movers have to have a lockout strategy. So when you think about going into a market, how are you going to keep other people out? Segmentation is a process of grouping people together. And no product can be all things to all people. And that's why you divide customers into categories. How do I find it? I look at the characteristics. Is it focused? Is it varied on the outside? Who gets you? Who's going to get excited by you? And you pick a couple of markets because nobody really knows which one is going to pay off for you. So you have to put down some bets to see what works. But you talk to people and you spread the word about you. Segmentation variables that people look at. It could be geographic, it could be demographic, it could be psychographic, or it could be industrial. Where do segmentation variables come from? Well, thinking about your archetype. For example, if I have a carbon fiber skateboard, who am I thinking about? Well, somebody young, somebody who's likely to be in warmer weather, somebody who's hard on their board. So these are the guys who do stunts. And why not competitors? Because they're looking for an advantage. Another type of segmentation is, we proposed this 10 years ago, and the Fulton School is thinking about it. But what a co-op is that during the summers, you go work for a company. And then your senior year summer, you go work for a company for 6 months. You work on a master's thesis. Then you come back to school for 6 months and write up your thesis. And so it's a 4+1 program. You get a master's degree. Plus you get a lot of work experience. So who have you market to? Well, community colleges, high schools, undecided. And then from community colleges, you have county community colleges, STEM. High schools, who do you talk to? Advisors, STEM classes, business classes. Different high schools have different sizes. Undecided, it's the different schools here. And so you break it all up. Now, when you do basically virtual maps, each quadrant you give a name. For example, if you're an active person, but you like leisure travel, then you're a world adventurer. Pick the core values of your business. And then once you pick one, there's nothing to prevent you from continuing to further segment your map. There's a bullseye approach, which is start inside and work out. Luxury hotels, brand hotels, discount hotels. Maybe you make tables to figure out, how do I characterize my different markets? Segmentation criteria. Is it identifiable, meaning homogeneous inside, meaning people all the same, and outside, people are very different? Is it substantial? Is it stable? Will it be responsive to what I do? Is it accessible for me but defensible once I get in there? And can I take actions where I can take advantage of that market? So when you look at a segment, you should be testing it according to this criteria. You need numbers to back up what you're saying. There's examples in your book. This is the one they use. Targeting is who do you go after? And so in targets, there's the TAM, SAM, and total market, meaning the total addressable market. Those are all the people who would be interested in your product. Your specific address market are people you can reach, and your target market is the segment that you can go after. And so here it is. The entire market is the industry, your addressable market, your served available market, and finally your target market. And your target market's what you sign up with. In terms of your segment, totally addressable, serviceable, and target. And the way you can think of each of these markets is they're buckets, that they're composed of many smaller markets. And there's only so many people who will buy from you. So once you fill up a bucket, you need to go get another bucket. And as you can see, the bigger you go, the bigger the number of buckets becomes. And so that's the basics of marketing.